What's up, everybody? Come hang out for a little bit. I'm just hanging out over here. Hey, Sue. Good of you to make it. Hey, guys. What's going on? Just hanging out. Drinking a little tea. Just kind of chilling. What are you guys up to this evening? Hopefully, you guys are doing something fun. Oh. Yeah, I had meant to put it. I had meant to schedule it ahead of time, but when I tried earlier, it didn't work very well. So I figured I'd set it up live at the time of doing it. Apparently, if you try to schedule it, it wants you to have your own streaming software, and the one I've got's out of date and doesn't work very well. Oh, I like Subnautica. Hey, there's Page Burner. What's up, man? Oh, just kind of sitting around. I was recording some videos for next week, and I thought I'd pop on for a little bit and hang out with you guys. So, but yeah, I like Subnautica. I've never really played it a lot, but I like what I've seen so far. I might have to get more into it. Oh, excuse me. I've been sick lately, so my sleep schedule is all over the place. Just can't seem to kick this crud. That's why if my voice sounds a little crispier than usual, it's probably that. I've lost my voice a couple of times over the past few days. There we go. That window a little bigger. That's about us over here, yeah. We back to work. This has been my short week, so a couple of days off and then it's back to work. Oof, I hear that. I've got next week is my work 2 days, off 2 days, and then work all weekend. So be a good chance to get some writing done. I've been kind of working on repository stories lately, so that I've got kind of a backlog of canonical stuff. But Sundays are always for my Dollar General stuff because I got to get that book done. I'd really like to put it out while the hype is still big around that story. Be nice to sell some copies. I'm trying to set up a TikTok shop right now, but I don't know if I'm too dumb or what, but I just don't get it. I'm working on it though. Give you guys somewhere to buy books that's not Amazon, I guess. I know they can be a little finicky sometimes. Oh. I'll call them back. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm calling it like Douglas Gage Beyond at this point, but you know, if I called it Dollar General, they'd sue the shit out of me. So I probably shouldn't do that. If I thought I could strike up a deal with them where they'd sell it for me, I'd definitely go in with them. But that seems unlikely. Very few businesses, surprisingly, like it when you know, compare them to a monstrous system of back rooms. Shocker, I know. But if I write it up as the Douglas Gage, then at least I can make my own lore too. Not like Dollar General hasn't got some pretty good lore. Like I went on their Wikipedia when I was writing the original story, and they've got some pretty solid history there. Pumpkin, do you mind? Scritch, scritch, Jingle Bell, stop it! And you're just gonna scratch harder, jerk. Yeah, I know, right? There's like it's like dozens of people on Reddit that are like, man, if you put it out, I'll buy it. So like, I know there's a market for it. I don't know. I'll have to market it myself anyway because Amazon certainly isn't gonna like advertise it for me. Trying to keep my voice from cracking there. Oh, I think some of you guys that have been listening for a while will like Monday's story. It kind of hems up a two-parter that I've turned into a three-parter with this story. If any of you guys remember the true story that I wrote about my time in the woods where I was hanging out with pagans, it kind of wraps up that nicely. Oh, coffee was what I should have went with, but I figured this late at night it'd be nice to have some tea. It's a green tea citrus blend, so I'm hoping that it's good for my immune system at least. I've been fighting this crud, which is miserable. Never fails. I go on a live stream and everybody's got to call me. Anyway. Okay. Pagans are cool. I used to hang out with a lot of them when I lived in Georgia. Um, they do cool stuff out in the woods usually, which was why I was hanging out with them. A lot of paranormal stuff. A lot of them are into the paranormal scene, so that's how I got hooked up with them. Fun guys. We've we've done a lot of stuff I can't talk about on YouTube out in the woods, so always a good time. Back during my early 20s though, so nobody's got time for that anymore. Unless I'm seeing Road with Pagans. I think you're talking about the motorcycle group, maybe. I'm talking about the pseudo religious nuts. Nothing I was going to do falls under the First Amendment, but yeah, they don't like any of the stuff I was going to have to talk about either. They definitely have some kooky rules. I've not managed to run afoul of them yet. Very nice. Pagans have some fun parties for definite. Sometimes it gets creepy. If you remember the story in question, it definitely got creepy. I was they knew I did paranormal stuff, and we were they were asking if I could make something that would protect their little gathering, and we burned some incense and we made a decent size circle, but they got high and stumbled into it. So oops, I hung out in my tent for the rest of the night. I was like, I don't want any part of this. This is going to end bad, and it did. It did not end well. Um, they did not have a good time. But you just don't mess around with the stuff in the Georgia woods. The Appalachian countryside is not somewhere you just want to like blunder off into if you can help it. Yep, I think that was the title. No, wait a minute. It was like what was that? A Night in the Woods or something like that. Last time I go hanging out with people in a cult in the woods. Some of them, I did not see the next morning when I was packing up, so I don't know. The second part of the story is totally embellished, but like the first part of the story, it was after they started doing dumb stuff. I went and sat in my tent for the rest of the night, and then I packed up in the morning and left. I was not down with that. Yeah, nah. I think you guys will like my lineup for next week. I'm uh I'm gonna do the Dr. Winters story that I talked about last week on Friday. So if if you guys had wanted it last week, you'll get it this week. So I'm working on some other Dr. Winters stuff too. Um Working on a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff in the works. Um the inmate that we saw last week in the Stragview story is going to start making regular appearances in there too. So if you liked that story, you'll like what's coming up. Um, there's some cool stuff coming up. I think you guys will like it. I'm waiting on the last few lines from La Dama de Blanca so that we can do a 5 days of Grandpa stories that's coming up too. Um, him mate was probably really cool. He's gonna be a lot around a lot too. He's gonna feature in a few stories. Um, what was I talking about? Anyway, no, there's a 5-part Grandpa story that's coming up that's going to end out the second year of Grandpa. Um, I think you guys will like it. I don't want to spoil it, but it's glimmer heavy, and that's what a lot of you guys have been waiting for. I think you guys will like it. It's a good story. It was fun to write. I'll tell you that. All the Grandpa stuff is fun to write, though. I love to write about my favorite Appalachian grandpa. I know, Paige. I know, but I'm waiting on lines, man. I don't want to start season 3 without ending out season 2. So just what's up, Crystalline? Just waiting on them lines, and then we'll get it in the wind. It's I'm doing all right. Just getting over this creeping crud that I've been fighting for 2 weeks. Got my tea and just hanging out with you guys. I was uh I was gonna play some New Vegas tonight, but I figured I'd hang out with you guys instead. I made the mistake of going to Big Mountain, and I don't really like it, but there's no way out of it now, so I'm just kind of stuck. I'm gonna have to slog through it eventually, but eventually is not right now. And you guys watch the new show? That new Fallout show is pretty cool. I of course binged it all in like 2 days. So. But yeah, I like what they did with the lore there. They changed it a little, but I think it's all for the best. So, mm, not your cup of tea, Crystal, and I totally understand. The Fallout stuff's an acquired taste. It's a good show though. It's got enough action and suspense to hook most people that aren't fans. Definitely brought a lot of people into the fandom, which I'm all for. I've been playing Fallout since like 93. No, 95. Sorry, 95 with the first one. I need to see the Silo series. It's on my to watch list. I mean, the only reason I had heard of it was because it was from a franchise that I had played the games of, so I was stoked. But I know it's a lot of people just kind of picked it up and have kind of liked it. It makes them want to play the game sometimes. I didn't know it was a book series. My wife's had me reading ACOTAR lately, which I'm on book 3 of, so I've been trying to slog through that. Jesus, I keep having to fast forward through it. It's like I don't care about the smut. I just want to get the story. I just want the story. It was like that with Fourth Wing too, though. She got me on Fourth Wing, and I'm like, I just no horny. I just want story. I think it's called a Court of Thorns and Roses is what it's actually called, but everybody calls it ACOTAR. Even after the first one is a Court of Thorn and Roses, but everything after that is just ACOTAR apparently. I mean, that's kind of been its demographic though. Like, um, everything's just kind of like everything in the Fallout stuff like makes it pretty clear. Like, the bombs dropped like a long time ago, so now everything's just kind of like leveled, which I mean is cool. I mean, it makes you feel like an archaeologist, kind of like sifting through old world stuff when you fight raiders and robots and giant scorpions and stuff. At least that was what I always liked about it. It was what always appealed to me. Even with the top down ones, I liked exploring. That's what I do in every game I play, is just explore. I like Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, for definite. I didn't realize there was more than one book either until I started reading them. I was excited last week. I got all 15 books of the Dresden Files, so I'm going to start bringing those to work with me to read too, for when I get bored of writing. Love the Dresden Files series. There's a lot of my like ghost detective Killian stories in the Dresden Files. Like, if you read the Killian Barger stuff, you will definitely see the spirit of the Dresden Files in there. I love me some Jim Butcher. Yay! Totes. Can I hit the like button? I don't know where the like button is. Yes. No, that's not the like. I think your like button is different than mine. Yes, Ostritz. I think they really should have done more with it. Like, I liked the show for what it was, but I was really hoping that somebody bigger than Sci-Fi would pick it up, maybe like HBO, and do like a whole thing out of it. As long as they don't ruin it like they did with True Blood. Like, True Blood kind of went off the rails after a while. You never knew what was going to happen there. I mean, I'd say they did the same thing with Game of Thrones, but who knows, since George R. won't give us another book. Been waiting 10 years for this book, and it looks like I'm gonna have to wait another 10. But I don't know. I really wish that like HBO would pick up some more book series. Them are stars. They always do really good work with them. Like, I like what they did with The Walking Dead. I mean, up until the later seasons. The later seasons were okay, I guess. They just, again, they kind of went off the rails a little. CW would have done a good job, I think. If they did the same thing with Supernatural that they did with with the Dresden Files, I think they'd be okay. They could even cast the guy that plays Dean as Dresden. Wouldn't hurt my feelings at all. But I like the guy they got to play him in the show on Sci-Fi. I forget his name. He's also the commissioner in Arrow, which I was like, hey, it's Harry Dresden, commissioner of the Green Arrow town, whatever town they're in. I can never remember. But The Magician was a good one too. I like what is it called? My wife and I really liked Shadow and Bone on Netflix too. I think they did a good job with that one. It was a little different than the book, but I think they did a good job. I haven't seen all of Supernatural yet. It's like when my wife was watching what's it called? The one with Archie and Jughead in it. I can never remember. It's like I would just come in for like 5 or 6 episodes and then have to go to work. Um and then it's like, "Hey, what's going on?" "Oh, they're all superheroes now." "Neat. Okay. What's going on?" "It's a murder mystery now." "Oh, okay, neat. Yeah, Riverdale." That was it. Um I would come in after like 6 episodes and she's on a whole new season and I'm like, I don't understand, but I'll sit and watch for a little while." Um I liked what Netflix did with Sabrina up until season 3 as well. I really think they should have stuck a little closer to the comics. Maybe done a Riverdale crossover like they did in the comics too. That would have been cool. Um, I I think my wife's got one of the hats. Like somebody on Etsy was selling the Jughead crowns, and she got one. Yeah, so many good shows out. Like I don't know. There's so much to watch. I've been watching the new X-Men on Disney Plus too, and I really love it. Like it's really nostalgic. Given that I used to watch the cartoon in the '90s, so it really appeals to me. I like Grimm too. It didn't go long enough. I would have definitely watched more Grimm. I feel like it got cut too soon. Sit up a little there. Ugh. Um, Trying to think, what else were we watching not too long ago? I love Criminal Mind. Um, Boardwalk Empire is actually my comfort show. Like I love Boardwalk Empire. I will I've watched it like to completion like 5 times and I'll probably watch it 5 more times. It's a show that I've seen so often I could put on in the background and like just do other stuff with. Um it's like Gangs of New York. That's got to be my favorite movie. I love Gangs of New York. Again, just put it on in the background and watch whatever. And watch Daniel Day-Lewis do just about anything. Ugh, excuse me. Gangs of New York is one of those weird movies too that like you tell people about and they're like, "What is that? I've never seen it." It's like it's a 3-hour movie. How have you never seen this movie? Scorpion. I don't think I've ever seen that one either. I don't know how people expected X-Men to be bad. Like you just follow the same formula you had in the '90s. The '90s had lightning in a bottle up to season 5. Season 5 was terrible, but um you just did do what you did back then. It wasn't that hard. I didn't know what to expect from Fallout. I'm really glad they didn't mess it up. Like I'm really glad that they didn't screw it up. That would have made me real sad. That sounds interesting. I would watch that. Sounds like shoot, what is that show? There's a show like that that I used to watch, but I can't remember what it's called. Um I don't know. It'll come to me. It'll come to me when I'm on my way to bed at like 2 hours after I end the stream, I'm sure. And I'll just like sit up and be like, was it? 'Cause that's just how that works, apparently. I've seen Chuck either. I don't know. I didn't have cable for a long time, so I've missed a lot of TV. Like now I watch stream. At this point, I think that's what most of my patrons pay for on Patreon is for me to grab streaming services. 'Cause I've got about them all. I did drop Hulu after I got Crunchyroll because that was all I ever did on Hulu was watch anime. It was like, why should I keep it at this point? I don't know if any of you guys remember Channel Zero, but I really wish they had continued with that too. I would have loved to have reached out to them and put a couple of my creepy series on there. I liked what they did with the whole Candle Cove thing. Candle Cove was like one of my earliest creepypastas I remember watching, and it was one of my favorite. Like there for a couple of months, I would gravitate towards any Candle Cove lore that I saw. And when somebody told me that it was on Channel Zero or like yeah, Channel Zero, I loved it. Like it was I think I bought all of season 1 on YouTube. Um which there for a while that's just what I was doing. I've got like 3 seasons of the X-Files on there and like first season of Channel Zero and just Gangs of New York and Street Kings and just like movies and shows that I enjoy. I like The Outer Limits too. Um, People bag on The Outer Limits for being a Twilight Zone ripoff, but I think Outer Limits went harder than the Twilight Zone. Quite honestly, like they had some story plots that were definitely way darker, and they weren't afraid to go there sometimes either, which I really liked. Um, I need to watch the other 2 seasons of Channel Zero. I heard they weren't as good as the first season, but I would have still like I think they would have done good with my Kashmir series. I think they'd have done a good job with it. Of course, that would have required me to finish it. I don't even know where I'm going with the whole Kashmir thing. Um, it's probably good. Candle Cove and like 1999 and shoot, there was another one that I used to listen to a lot. Um, it might have been the Russian Sleep Experiment. Um, just, like really early, like creepy. Back during like the early days of creepypasta when they were still kind of like feeling it out for popularity, and they went like they went hard. Like these creepy pastas, like I was a grown up when I found these. Like I was like 28 or 29 when I first found creepy pastas. And like I I fell for them, but this was back when I'm like, man, I'm an adult and these things creep me out. Like some of them, like the subject matter was just wild. Yep. The 90s Outer Limits were the stuff. Like they had good plot lines, they had good stories, and it was super dark. Like the one I always remember is the guy who I guess he lost his son and he like put him into a robot and like he had his niece or like his cousin or something like watch the robot kid. I think the robot kid like killed his cat or something too. Like it was wild. But I loved the Outer Limits when I was like in my teens. See, I think the first creepypasta I ever read or listened to was the Russian Sleep Experiment on Creeps McPasta's channel. Like he was the first creepy narrator that I ever read or that I ever listened to. Um and it was God, that was like 10 years ago, I guess. About 10 years ago. Because I was still working for the health department back then, so I had plenty of time to listen then. Um, then I started doing trivia hosting, and they gave me a Spotify Premium um, membership as part of that, and then I started listening to like horror podcasts, and that was where I got all of my all my creepypastas after that. Like the No Sleep podcast, and there's another one I used to listen to. I think it's gone now. I can't remember what it was called, but they had some good stuff on there too. It's where I got a lot of ideas for my own creepy stories. I think that was about the time I started writing them myself. Come to think of it, um, yeah, yeah, about 10 years ago. God, it doesn't seem like it should have been that long ago. Yeah, about 10 years ago, though. I like Lighthouse. Lighthouse Horror is one of my favorite narration channels too. Um, I mean, I listen to Mr. Creepypasta a lot because he reads a lot of my stuff, and he reads such a wide variety of stuff too. Um, Lighthouse Horror actually um, requested me to write a few stories for his channel. He changed the titles of them, so I have no idea which ones they are, but um, I've wrote some stuff for him that he reads on there. He pays really well too. Like his commission price, I look forward to hearing from him because his commission prices are usually about double what I usually get, which is nice. I like Lighthouse a lot. Dark Somnium's another one that's really coming up. Yep. Um, trying to remember. Um, I'm about the same way. I think I've listened to a lot of Lighthouse Horror stuff. I haven't seen a lot come out of I haven't seen a lot come out of Creeps McPasta lately. I don't know what it is. Like he hasn't been on his usual upload tick. I hate it for the guy. Um, I don't know, Sue. His stuff's been okay. It hasn't. I blame a lot of that on the what's been going on No Sleep lately. Um, Mr. Creeps was sick. I think he had something. He was in the hospital for a while. Um, he does. He puts a lot of Lighthouse puts a lot of effort into his stuff. Um, he really puts a lot of effort into his narrations. He does a lot of sound effects and things. I think that was yeah. I think you're right, Crystal, and I think he had high blood pressure. I know he was in a couple of years ago for COVID stuff, and I think a lot of that's messed with his blood pressure too. It has mine. My blood pressure's been through the roof after COVID. I I had to cut back on my coffee, which really hurts me because I'm caffeine dependent. Oh, one of these one of these days I'll have the time and the ad revenue to put the effort that Lighthouse puts into his videos. I know he spends a lot of time on his videos. Oh, I can't wait for Mr. Creepypasta to do another live stream. I really like his live streams. I like to lurk in his comment sections, but like I really like his live streams. He does a good job, and it's always nice to hear it live. I think COVID messed with a lot of us blood pressure wise. I've noticed a lot of weird health stuff going on after COVID. I haven't seen creepy ghost stories yet. I may have to look him up. Um, I don't know. Here lately, I've been reading a lot more on No Sleep, but that's usually because I'm looking for content, trying to find stuff for the Tuesday Thursday segments. I got to get on there this weekend actually, and next weekend, and grab a few more stories. I like to have a little bit of a repository for just stuff. Wasn't that long ago either. I don't think Lighthouse has been on the scene for very long. Like I became aware of him like maybe 2, 3 years ago. Um, I I don't think I really became aware of him until about 2 years ago. But he blew up quick. True. There's a lot of them. They're really blowing up quick. I'm not sure how they do it. I wish they'd fill me in. I mean, I like the rise in sub count that I'm getting, but it'd be nice to wake up to, like 10,000 subs or something. Some of these guys they shoot up really quick. I say that like I'd know what to do with 10,000 subs. Like, yeah, I think a lot of people picked up creepypastas about 5 years ago, unless they were in it like a long time ago. Like I talk to people sometimes that have apparently been in it since like the early 2000 teens, where they were picking it up off of like message boards and stuff. I'm sure I will. I'm like I said, I'm pretty satisfied with my growth so far. It's it's been nice. Just a slow uptick. I like that. It gives me a good audience, especially for projects like over on the Hell channel that I can cross promote and get some other small channels some views and things. That one's coming up pretty well too. I think we've almost hit 100 subs over there. Um, and it's like I said, it's really nice to be able to give like some smaller narrators like a chance to be seen and to reach some people that they might not be able to reach normally. I I like this community. Like I've never made any bones about it. Like I wrote I wrote fantasy for like 20 years, like since I was in like elementary school, and the fantasy community was never half as engaging and like accepting as the horror community. I wish I'd started earlier. How long have I been on YouTube? About 3 years, I guess, 2 or 3 years. Um, I think I'm either coming up on three or I'm coming up on two. It's hard to remember. I started out on TikTok though. I was doing TikTok shorts, um, reading my stories like a minute at a time. Now I read them like 3.5 minutes at a time. I need to start putting more stuff up on TikTok, especially if I'm gonna sell my books in the TikTok shop. I need something for people to come and look at. I think a lot of us that's how we found Lighthouse was from Let's Read recommending him. Um, I didn't know he was active 4 years ago though. I I had heard of him. I don't think I really became aware of him, like aware of him until like about a year ago when he came to ask me for to write some stories for him. Like I said, he had like hove through my recommendeds, but I don't think I had like really listened to him regular until then. Probably. A lot of people when I would like lurk in the comment section of Mr. Creepypasta stuff, they would just go ahead and sub just because, which really gave me a leg up when I started, excuse me, when I started doing narrations. Yeah, yeah, that was back when I wasn't really sure how to level things out properly. I'm um I'm going back and redoing a lot of those videos too, like fixing the sound and putting in some of my other music. As I use Soundful, which is an AI music program to like just do background sound. Um, because it can't be copyright struck. I was using Pixabay to use their royalty free music, but the problem is that like it's free this week and then it's not the next, and they'll copyright strike you. and I got tired of getting hit. So I figured, hey, I'll make my own music and put it up there. That way, they can't copyright strike that. I made it. So I've been going back and doing that with a lot of my videos, like fixing the audio and putting in better toned music to kind of like A, to stop from getting copyright struck, and B, because you're right, the sound quality was off in a lot of my old videos. Lighthouse, I just had a Lighthouse video on my recommendation earlier today, actually. I can't remember what it was, but like I get a bunch of them because they know I listen to creepypasta stuff, and it's nice. Like it's if I'm just like sunning in the backyard, or like I'm like doing dishes, or like cleaning up the living room or something. It's nice to have something to listen to. He does. He's got a lot of range in voices. He's like I do a lot of voices, but he does a lot of voices. Like that guy's got a good ear for stuff. And good for him, man. Like voices are hard sometimes. Like he's got such a wide range too. And his delivery is always on point. Um, well, it's the problem with Pixabay's free music was that they could take it down if they wanted to. And once they take it down, it's not free anymore. And so I would get dinged on it because of course they'd put it up somewhere else. And it's like, well, it was free when I used it, and YouTube doesn't accept that. They're like, well, it's not free now, so you're gonna have to find something else to do. And so finally I decided to make my own. It's Soundful's super easy too. Like it's like $50 a year, and you just mix your own little music. Like it's super easy. Oof, 9 hour Slender Man story. That would take a while. Cheesy Pete's. I can't imagine reading for that long. Like, I know you guys see some people in my comment section wanting longer videos, but those longer ones really wreck your voice sometimes. 15 to 20 minutes is about that sweet spot for me. But like I've been trying to find some longer ones or write some longer ones, and those 45-minute videos, like you almost have to do them in stages. Um, like you've got to do them over a course of days, or you're gonna kill your voice. Especially with me being sick lately, like I know some of my videos have sounded a little crunchy. I may have to go listen to that then. I do like Slenderman stuff. Is it new Slenderman stuff, or is he reading like an older story? Mm-hmm. Well, that's the good thing about the weekends is you always get like at least like a couple of they always get at least like an hour and a half. Um, some weekends you get like 2 or 3 hours, like depending on the size of the story. And then like at the beginning of the month, you get like you get those like big long like month compilations, which I've started to notice are coming up on like 4 or 5 hours sometimes. Like it's wild. My computer hates those. Like it hates to compile anything over like a couple hours. It'll do it. It's killing it. Oh, excuse me. I'm gonna start adding a few more of those in too. Um, those uh, like usually in July I do like a Christmas in July thing, but it's about to it's about to get to the time of the year where I've got to start doing like my summer stories, my fall stories. I'm going to start working on my Halloween stories. You guys know I always put on for you for Halloween, so like I got to start working on my Halloween stories. Um, it doesn't really take longer to upload them. It just takes longer to compile them. I use Vegas Movie Studio, and it sometimes it takes a while to like compile them together. I liked Tin Can Sam because I got to break out my Herbert voice, which is way creepier than it should be sometimes. Like, I've got people that like watch that Tin Can Sam video and just like laugh raucously because they're like, I can't believe you put a creepy pervert voice in there. Seemed fitting. I mean, come to think of it, the new video should have been up about 45 minutes ago, I guess. So when we get done here, you guys will have to go watch that. That's it's the Sunday showcase, so it'll be other people's stories, but should be some good stuff. That sounds like me with my audiobook sometimes. I I'll like start listening to them and then fall asleep and have to rewind them. That's cool. I'm about to go look that up. That sounds neat. Um, I I know he's old and cliche now, but I really like Slender Man stories. Like they really, when I was first starting out in creepypastas, like they really had like taken the internet by storm, and I really like them. I liked the Tin Can Sam story. I wrote it around the same time that I was like writing the Whistler story, if you remember that one. I think that one's on the same compilation. Come to think of it. Um, but yeah, no, like that was such a cool story. Um, I was actually working on a screenplay while I was while I was writing that one, and that was going to be like my middle episode, like when things really start to get weird. Multiple entities. I don't remember that one. Um, not bumping the night. Maybe was it the guy and his wife, and they had just bought the house, and there's like ghosts in it or something. Um, I can't remember. The Whispering Hole. Yeah. I liked that one too. That was another summer story. One of these days I got to compile up all my scout stories and do something with them. Um, I think my favorite one I did was campfire stories. Like I did it like forever and ever and ever ago. The one about the kids who are out on a scout trip and like I guess their scoutmaster gets killed and they're trying to figure out who did it, and there's that whistling cave nearby with a witch in it allegedly. Um, that one was actually I remember reading this Berenstein Bears book when I was a kid about a bunch of scouts that got scared by a cave that like wailed or something, and they found out there was like a hole in the top of it or something. And I made it into a scarier story. But I liked that one. I think it was called Campfire Stories, and it was a two-parter. But I really liked that story. Like I wrote that one like forever and ever ago, like back when I was first starting out. Yep, that was like I go back and look at some of my old stuff sometimes, and I'm like, oh God, some of these are rough. Um, like I think I'm on like my ninth or 10th edit of my first book, where I had to go back and change like so much of it because I'm like, man, some of these don't read at all. Some of these are like word soup, and they're not good. Trying to stay awake over here. Oh. I can. You guys want some stories tonight? Let's see. Let's see. Maybe just a couple. Oh, let's see. I grabbed Sleepless Nights. So if you have a copy, feel free to read along. Let's see. What do we got? Oh, hang on. That one's got a story we were discussing earlier. There it is. It's the one we were talking about earlier with the pagans in it. I'll read that one for you guys. It's called One Night in the Woods. So, like I said, it's Sleepless Nights. If you've got your own copy, feel free to read along. I was drinking with some friends a few nights ago, swapping stories from old times, when my roommate reminded me of these guys I hung out with. Or, as he put it, that time you hung out with those crazy pagans in the woods. The crazy pagans in question were a coven I crossed paths with while I was living in North Georgia. No one tells you when you move there that there's a lot of non-Christian communities in the North Georgia hills. Given my interests at the time, I've met pagans, Wiccans, Druids, and many other practitioners of strange and foreign beliefs. Most are just hobbyists, people with a passing interest who find the mystic section at Barnes and Nobles and go a little nuts. However, some take this shit very seriously, and sometimes they take it a little too far. Oh, well, thank you. This story is about one of those groups. I had taken a semester of religious studies, which led me down the rabbit hole that led to a general interest in the occult and mysticism. This led to a lot of brooding in the back of my college library, reading over old books and making notes on strange subjects and odd topics. I had taken an interest in runes, and that was how I met Patrick. He was calling himself Wormwood in those days, and he was teaching me about runes in exchange for some notes I had made about energy exchange. We became friends and started hanging out a bit at the coffee shop in Dahlonega that catered to our sort of crowd. That was where I met Amadeus. We're reading One Night in the Woods if you're just joining us, so have a seat. As enamored as I was with the idea of mysticism, Amadeus was still very peculiar. I arrived to meet with Patrick one day to find a man in his mid 40s sitting next to him. His gray hair was braided down his back, and his bald crown was oiled and gleaming. He wore an honest to God traveling cloak, not one of those hot topic long coats that our crowd usually wore. His shirt was obscured with silver charms hung on long leather thongs around his neck. He stared at me as I sat down, fingers steepled before his eyes in a most wizardly fashion, and began volleying very probing questions before Patrick could properly introduce him. He wanted to know what I knew about runes, tarot, demonology, herbcraft, and everything in between. I had studied quite a bit and was happy to flex my knowledge for him. So we spent about an hour just talking shop, and he must have been impressed with what I had to say. I'd have left right then if I'd have known. I would have left right then if I'd known what he wanted. You seem pretty knowledgeable. It appears that Wormwood did not exaggerate your abilities. I'm looking for someone to come into the woods with us for a gathering. I need someone capable of setting up and maintaining a protective circle around our campfire and acting as a guide while we await the spirits. I'm willing to pay if you're willing to come out for the weekend. We are reading One Night in the Woods if you're just joining us, so have a seat. We talked a little more about what was expected of me and came to an agreement. I would set up a protective circle, provide scholarly advice, and keep them from wandering into the forest if something took notice of our gathering. This would be a standard gathering for them, some 20 members of their coven coming together. Amadeus was pretty clear that it could get rowdy. He would give me $250 today and another $250 at the end of the weekend. As a poor college student, it sounded pretty good to me. I'd done similar things before, setting up circles and safeguarding people. Sounded like an easy $500 at the time. Excuse me. I took his money and set about getting a few things together for that weekend. I'd need a few things to pull this off, and I honestly wasn't expecting much more than some drinking in the woods and a bit of babysitting. By Friday, I had assembled my components and made my way to the agreed upon spot. They had decided not to use an established campground, but opted to camp in a section of the woods off the beaten trail. They claimed to have heard about it from someone in our circle, and it was supposed to have ties to the supernatural. I arrived to find about 6 other vehicles down an access road, most of them old vans and SUVs. Just as I was wondering how far into the woods they had gone, the door to one of the vans slid open. Out popped a short blonde woman in a homemade dress. I say short, but she was probably about 5'2", with a long spill of silver blonde hair. She asked me my name, and when I told her, she smiled and said she'd been waiting for me. She told me that her name was Andromeda, but I could call her Angie, and that she was my guide for the weekend. Amadeus said that I should keep an eye on you. I'm to assist you in anything you might need this weekend. That should have been a huge red flag, but I kind of shrugged it off at the time. Angie led the way as we walked about a mile into the woods. She chattered about how much she had been looking forward to this weekend. She said that Amadeus had been researching the area and thought that this was a good spot for communing with spirits. The area was well known for sightings, and the coven was hopeful that they could make contact with whatever lived in the woods. They kept saying coven, but as the campsite came more into view, I was beginning to wonder if cult might be a better word. The clearing was a circle of about 30 foot wide and about 12 tents set inside of it. The forest loomed around the campsite, and the forest loomed around the campsite, and an old forest that seemed to resent having a section of itself gouged out so people could camp. At the center of the tents was a fire pit, a big one with a lot of styrofoam coolers sitting around it. I could see people bustling around the campsite, making adjustments to tents and setting up sleeping bags. Angie led me to the fire pit where Amadeus was reading a book and smoking what smelled to be a joint. He looked at my duffel bag and asked if I'd brought enough supplies to put a circle around the whole campsite. I told him I had, but I was already doing the math and realizing the sage I had brought would go quickly. We're reading One Night in the Woods if you're just joining us, so have a seat. He nodded and told me that they had more supplies in one of the tents if I needed them. He also told me that Angie would work with me this weekend. Use her in any capacity you see fit, he said, and the lecherous grin was hard to miss. That was red flag number 2. Seeing as most of the coven members were women, I was beginning to get a pretty good idea about what sort of setup I had stumbled across. I felt a little squeamy about it, but who was I to judge if they were all consenting adults? I'd already decided what capacity I would use Angie in that weekend, and whatever Amadeus had didn't figure into it. I wasn't supposed to be sleep. I wasn't opposed to sleeping with women that I had just met, but the idea of sleeping with someone who might not be 100% okay with it was a non-starter for me. I told him I needed to set up my tent, but it was quickly whisked away by a pair of women in homespun dresses who started setting it up near Amadeus's large ornate dwelling. So, instead, Angie and I set about setting up the protective circle. I won't bore you with the details. My process probably wouldn't work for you anyway. We dug a small trench around the campsite and filled it with items that I would use to seal the circle. If this sounds dumb to you, it sounds pretty dumb to me now, too. When I look back on it through the lens of time, I realize I was no less deluded than the rest of them. But that kind of code of silence is pretty common in these communities. Even if you think someone's full of shit, you keep your mouth shut because you don't want them to call you on your bullshit. If you're lucky, you grow out of it. If you're not, you become like Amadeus and his little harem. Hopefully, not literally, though. We're reading One Night in the Woods if you're just joining us, so have a seat, listen to a story. By the time we finished, I was sweaty and ready to settle down for the night. Angie had been a pretty big help, and as we talked, I learned that she'd been with the community for about 7 years. One of the women, whose hair was very similar to hers, kept bringing us water, and I started to suspect that Angie might be her daughter. We set up the ingredients, and as we finished, I instructed her to start lighting the sage bundles I had placed every few feet. Once they were smoking, I lit the sticks and leaves and that I had put in there too, and hoped they would create a smoldering circle that would last until morning. When we stepped back inside, I spoke some pseudo Latin, made vaguely mystic hand gestures, and declared the circle closed. That seemed enough for the coven, and they set about the fire pit. The coolers, as it turned out, were full of beer. The women brought out a large pot full of soup makings and set it to hanging over the fire. Amadeus brought out a trunk from his tent, and I saw him passing out baggies of what I assumed were drugs. Mushrooms seemed to be the drug of choice, but many had pipes, and others were snorting something off the backs of their hands. A group of young men were listening to Amadeus wax philosophically, and he leaned over to let me know that my secondary duties for the evening were about to begin. Yeah, trigger warning for drug use, I assume. A little late now, though. I sighed. I guessed I was on guide duty. I had played the guide before at gatherings like this, and it was rarely fun once people started getting drunk or high. I guess designated adult sounds less fun than guide, but that was essentially what I was here to do. My job was to make sure that no one wandered off into the woods, no one slept on their back and drowned in their own puke, and no one tried to jump into the fire. Amadeus and his flock drank heavily and used heavily, but I was surprised at how tame the gathering was. Amadeus and the 5 or 6 young men were pretty much waited on hand and foot by the 2 dozen women, and Angie seemed to think it was her job to do the same for me. I had soup when I wanted it, despite telling her that I could get it myself. She also intercepted anyone who tried to offer me a beer or a drug and kept a bottle of water close to my hand. She helped me. She helped me the 2 or 3 times I needed to keep someone from tripping into the circle and was a delight to talk to. She was knowledgeable about many of the same things that I was, and I found myself having a good time, despite being an outsider in what was likely a cult gathering. I had just made a Kool-Aid joke in my head when the soup pot was taken down, and 3 women carried out a heavy iron vessel that they hung in its place. It was ugly and ill made, not the beautiful thing that you usually think about for these sorts of things. It looked like a big teapot, and the women started shoveling bundles of herbs into the top of it. I had no idea what kind of herbs they were, and when I asked Amadeus, he just winked at me and tittered. I told him that if they were planning to flood the campsite with smoke, I wouldn't be able to guide them if I was under the influence of whatever was in that pot. He snorted. The smoke isn't for you or us. The smoke is to entice the spirits. He called everyone around and set them around the fire as the kettle began to heat up and the smoke started creeping out. Good evening, my children. The meal has been eaten, and our most generous guide has set the circle. Excuse me. This was followed by applause, and I nodded half heartedly. Now, for the reason we're all here, the smoke will attract the spirits that dwell in the forest, and we will be free to view them from a safe distance, as they will be unable to cross our barrier. We're reading One Night in the Woods if you're just joining us. So come and have a story. The smoke had begun to increase a bit, and I could see it making its way up the spout and across the campsite. It smelled terrible, like burning syrup, but it didn't seem to affect anyone much. Most of them were already tripping on mushrooms or any number of other things, and the smoke did little more than to make them wrinkle their noses. As it began to billow out, Amadeus continued talking about philosophy, magic, and a good number of other things. His followers sat dutifully, hanging on his every word, and I tried to be polite as I checked my phone to see if I had any service. To no one's surprise, I had no bars, so I put it away and tried to act interested in Amadeus's TED Talk. As I listened, I started hearing noises in the woods. The smoke was pretty thick by then. I started hearing noises as Amadeus gave his dissertation on a fog bank. I mentioned this to Amadeus, and he got pretty excited. He instructed his followers to start chanting, taking it up first as they started copying him shakily, in undulating tones. I got up and went to the edge of the circle, kind of figuring the smoke had upset some of the natural wildlife, and I wanted to see what we had attracted the attention of. It was midsummer, and the idea that we had pissed off a bear or a small group of coyotes was not outside the realm of possibility. I stood at the edge of the circle, not wanting to break it and mess up the procedural magic, and squinted out into the dark woods. Now, if you've never been camping in the real woods, the first thing that you come to realize is that it's really dark out there. I know that sounds obvious, but it's a different kind of dark than your typical city dark. The woods only have to deal with the intrusion of the moon at night, and with the campfire starting to come down off its natural roar, it was very dark outside of the circle that I had made. I squinted and looked, but honestly, a bear could have swiped my face off before I saw him. I could hear something crunching around out there, something that sounded big. I returned to the fire, the flock still chanting and undulating, and I could hear the crunching noises coming from several points at once. He has heard our call, Amadeus rejoiced. That was when the trees started shaking. We're reading One Night in the Woods if you're just joining us, so come on down. Out in the woods, I could see the shadows of trees being shaken and pushed violently. Limbs were snapping all over the place as they shook. There was an underlying sound accompanying it. Something was scraping the tree bark, peeling it away angrily as whatever it was, whatever they were, kept battering the trees around the campsite. I say they because it wasn't just one tree that was being shaken. It was two, then three, then seven, and before long it seemed like the whole forest was trying to get up and leave. Above the sounds of the shaking trees and the snapping limbs, I could hear animal sounds too. I could hear dogs, cats, birds, the grunts of deer, the growling of a bear, the snort of a horse, and all of it around the campsite. I've been present for some weird stuff, shit that would make me feel pretty secure in my beliefs about something being out there, but this was different. This was downright terrifying. The flock, however, was ecstatic. This is apparently what they'd been waiting for, and they were quickly moving to the edge of the circle so they could see what they had come to see. I, however, went back to my tent to get something out of my duffel bag. I was kind of done with this thing, the magic having gotten pretty real pretty quick, and I wanted to see what exactly was out there. I still figured our smoke had pissed off a herd of deer or maybe a wild dog pack. and I didn't want to suddenly become dinner for something big and angry. I'd packed a deer spotting light that my dad had given me last Christmas, and I wanted it right now more than I ever wanted anything in my life. When I came out with it, I lit up a big section of the woods and started hunting. We're listening to One Night in the Woods if you're just joining us. One of the boys that had been sitting with Amadeus slapped it out of my hand about 20 seconds later, but that was 15 seconds longer than I needed. When I saw the deer, I almost breathed a sigh of relief. Well, not a deer, not really. It had antlers, so I guessed it was actually a buck. The antlers, however, were long, and the tines sort of wound together like vines. It was up on its hind legs, scraping its hooves against the trees in the way that I thought was kind of strange for a deer. I had heard of young bucks rubbing their antlers against the trees, mostly to get the velvet off and to sort of scratch an itch, but I had never heard of them rubbing their hooves against trees. When it turned its head to look at the light, its eyes glowed like an animal's eyes in a camera flash. When it turned its head, I could see that half the velvety skin was torn, showing the muscles of its face and the bones beneath. It took all I took all of this in before the light was slapped out of my hand, and I backed away from the circle, suddenly wanting none of this. People were standing around the edges, and as I backed away, I saw someone step over the trench and walk into the woods. Others followed suit, stepping into the ditch and snuffing out the sage. This would create holes in the circle. This would allow whatever was out there to come into our campsite. In my mind, we were already breached, and this job had become pretty dangerous. I am completely unashamed to say that I went to my tent, dug the padlock out, and padlocked the tent from the inside, and stayed there until morning. As I pulled the sleeping bag up around me, I could hear people outside the tent. From the dancing fire pit, I could also see shadows of things in the campsite. Some of them were on two legs, but some of them were on four. Some people laughed, others cried. A few of them screamed as they plunged into the dark woods. I shivered with fear till morning, and when the sun came up, I collected my things and got the hell out of there. The campsite wasn't some sacrificial pit, though. I could see people lying around, some in various states of undress, and the area around the bonfire was trashed. Coolers were smashed, beer cans were stomped and torn, and vegetables and food packages were strewn everywhere. Of Amadeus, there was no sign. I never saw him again, and Patrick said that no one had heard from him after that night. Oof. Let's see. His coven dissipated after that, and I never heard from any of them again. I was never paid for the other half of my fee, but I suppose that was fitting. I'd failed to guide them, and the ritual had gone awry. All I know is that I ran the mile back to my car and never looked back. I did a little research on my own when I got home, and it turns out that there had been a lot of weird happenings in those woods. People have reported seeing lights in the sky, hearing strange noises, hearing animals that aren't native to the region, and feeling and a feeling of overall dread was reported by those who stay there overnight. People have gone missing in those woods too, and authorities have never found a trace of them. I'm not going to sit here and claim that I had some kind of paranormal experience out there. I'm not going to tell you that I saw a skinwalker, a wendigo, an alien, or anything like that. I'm not going to tell you that I saw a ghost or a cryptid or anything else either. What likely happened was that Amadeus was burning some sort of psychedelic drugs in that kettle, and we all experienced a group hallucination. There, these are the things that I told my friends as we sat drinking around our yearly bonfire that night. After I told them my story, more than a few of them moved inside. I guess maybe the dark outside our cabin was a little too dark now. And that's the story. Oh, hope you guys enjoyed it. Ooh, voice is getting crunchy. Oof. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the live stream. I hate to cut it short, but I'm losing my voice. We'll do some more of these at some point, I'm sure. I like doing live streams. It's fun to come hang out with you guys. Couldn't this age be related? Relit? I mean, once it's out, it's usually out. Especially if they stomp on it. Probably he was just magic circles, from what I remember, are weird like that. Like they're very Dresden Filey. Like a lot of your pagans believe that like once you cross that circle, like you violated some kind of magic or something, and it's hard to get back together. I mean, I I was not in the mood to fight with that many people at the time either. Um, I don't I remember a little bit about that night. I don't remember all the shadows real well, but some weird shit definitely happened out in the woods. But that's pretty par for the course for Georgia. Yep, pretty much. If you've got that many inebriated people out in the woods, it is hard to get your mojo back at that point because you've got so many different breach points that you're trying to get everything back together. Yeah, it's not it's not it's not the same, and especially when you're dealing with all that sand out there, it's hard. You know, nobody likes sand. It's coarse, it's gritty, and it gets everywhere. But anyway, guys, it's been fun. I appreciate you guys coming to hang out with me. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. We will see you guys next time. Dr. Plague signing off. You folks have a wonderful evening.